Just
We'll come.
I really wish I could do something. Sitting over here.
All right, here we go. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the March 21st meeting of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. We're going to start off with roll call. I am present. Councilor McNamara,
Here.
Councilor Mattson,
Here.
Councilor Todd,
Here.
Councilor McLaughlin is excused, and Councilor Rice Hawkins.
Here.
Oh, there we go. Present and accounted for, and Mr. Steinhauser is not here yet, but we do believe he'll be joining us, so we do have a quorum. That being said, kind of a quick overview of tonight's meeting. Solid Waste Advisory Committee is meeting this evening primarily for a presentation from the General Services staff to discuss different aspects of the proposed contract as we move forward to look for ways for disposing of trash. We'll also receive an update regarding flow control, and ultimately we want to hear from the public tonight for comments about what they think of the information. We're going to adjourn the meeting this evening when public testimony is completed, and then we'll be returning here next Tuesday at 4:30 p.m. for the Solid Waste Advisory Committee to discuss all the aspects of what we've heard and ultimately formulate an opinion so that this committee will be making the recommendation to the full council for discussion on April 10th. That being said, I'm going to turn it over to the Chip Chesley, the Director of the General Services Department, for his presentation and discussion of flow control in the solid waste program.
Sure, there may be one thing we may want to take care of, and that'd be the approval of the January 5th.
Absolutely. I glossed right over that. I appreciate that. Do the committee members have a copy of the meeting minutes? Do we have a motion for approval?
I'll move approval.
Second.
Any discussion, comment, edits to the minutes?
I wasn't there, so I need to abstain.
Very good. Councilor Mattson abstains. Hearing no comments or I'm sorry, Councilor McNamara?
I wasn't here
Same.
either. I should have seen.
All right, those in favor? Aye.
Do you need a new second since she was?
Oh, okay. So we have
Second.
first and a second. But for the three of us who were at that
Yes,
meeting,
we agree.
all in favor?
Aye.
All right, that's a unanimous vote of Councilor Rice Hawkins, Councilor Todd, and myself. Thank you very much. Now we will turn it over to Chip Chesley.
All right, well, thank you very much. So one of the things before I jump into the PowerPoint presentation is I just want to remind members of SWAC that at the last council meeting, we introduced a report relative to flow control. And it's General Services recommendation to make some modifications to our solid waste ordinance regarding flow control. And at one point in time, when we were, I'm going to use the word, we were one of the sponsors of the waste energy facility up in Pennacook when it first started. It was important to aggregate sufficient waste volumes to make sure that it was economically viable. And part of that project, the city of Concord passed a local ordinance that said all waste generated within the city must go to that facility. And it's been on the books for a number of years. But it comes to mind now that things have substantially changed in the marketplace, where having to dispose of a lot of waste starts to become a liability. So General Services worked with our legal department, made some modifications to the ordinance, and that was, again, introduced as a report to City Council at your last meeting, and it will be brought up for consideration at your meeting in April. I think it's important that to keep that in mind, because as we get into the subsequent discussion on disposal and collection of solid waste, it presumes that we are going to disband or revise the solid waste ordinance to get away from the mandatory delivery of all of our waste going to one facility. So I just want to put that out there, and I think it's one of the first things on the council's agenda when we meet again in April. So relative to collection and disposal, we have a PowerPoint Can general services do anything without a PowerPoint? I don't know, but we seem to default to that all the time. And I want to walk you through the PowerPoint relative to the both disposal and collection considerations. And please feel free to ask any question as we go through. I want to keep this informal and interactive. So I think the first thing to do is just to reboot and take a look at where we are with the present contract. And the city is presently in year 9 of a 10-year solid waste and recycling collection and disposal contract. We've often referred to this contract as best in the state or best in the region or quite possibly best in the country. And I've always stated I'm not aware of any municipality that has a contract as favorable as the city of Concord now currently enjoys. The city presently does not and has not paid for recycling processing for something that generally hasn't been seen in the market since 2007 or so. And further, our present disposal fee is quite attractive, as are our collection costs and the escalators within our contract. It's a wide-ranging contract covering all aspects of the city's solid waste program, including curbside collection, containerized collection, disposal, processing, transportation, our downtown solid waste district, and transfer station operations. And the contract is set to end at the end of the fiscal year of 2024. So what we enjoy now is going to come to a screeching end on June 30th of 2024. So let's take a look at the competitive timeline. And here we share some steps we have gone through to get where we are today. The process started last summer with the writing of the request for proposals, we call them RFPs, and will culminate with the April 10th City Council meeting. Just to note here that this was a competitive process and not an extension of the present solid waste contract, and I think that's important to keep in mind. So in our RFP formulation, as you may remember, we elected to put out separate disposal and collection RFPs for 5-year terms. In doing this, we sought to attract new and different firms than only those who can provide both disposal and collection services to the city. Also, in doing this, we sought to make the award of both RFPs to the combination of the proposals that represent the lowest cost and in the best interest of the city. While different for the city from the present contract, it is similar to how separate disposal and collection agreements existed in the time of the Concord Cooperative and is common practice in southern New Hampshire cities and Massachusetts. Of course, we also knew a new contract would mean significant changes in terms of the solid waste fund's finances. Estimates to reflect these have been mentioned at SWAC meetings, budget hearings, and included in the solid waste performer for the past 3 years. Estimates of these changes were updated every year. And these changes include recycling market adjustments. Presently, we don't pay anything for the materials that we recycle. The average over the past 3 years has been about $100 a ton for a curbside collection of recycling. Disposal cost adjustments, presently we pay about $70 a ton. The market average right now is about $100 a ton. And collection cost adjustments, presently we are shielded from fuel and labor increases other than what we have put into as a annual 5% adjustment to the collection. So if fuel goes up higher than 5%, it's capped at 5%. In terms of our timeline, we just wanted to share the reason we started this process so early in advance of the present contract's expiration. And it's because principally of supply chain issues. If a new vendor were to need to capitalize their fleet in advance of the contract start date, it could take well up to 18 months or more to get equipment. And to put this in perspective, we had to wait over a year for a 2-wheel standard pickup truck. From the time we delivered it, it was actually a year for it to show up. And unfortunately, as a side note, it wasn't exactly what we expect. Heavy equipment can take much longer. So let's take a look at the proposals. So for the disposal RFP, the city received 4 proposals, with 1 being deemed non-responsive. The collection RFP yielded 3 proposals, with 1 being deemed non-responsive. This is generally in line with what we had expected to see in terms of response. There are not a lot of firms that are in the disposal or in the municipal collection markets. And regarding disposal, let's take a look, discuss disposal first. Of the 3 responsive disposal proposals, the city received 1 vendor, whom we will refer to as vendor A, proposed to the city waste at their transfer station and transport that waste to landfills within their portfolio. Wind Waste, the waste-to-energy facility located here in Concord, proposed to accept city waste at their site in Pennacook. And vendor B proposed to receive waste at their landfill in New Hampshire. As to collection proposals, we received 2 proposals. And I think this is important to pay attention at this point. Of these collection proposals, vendor A submitted a partial response. This response did not include price proposals for manual curbside collection of trash, transfer station operations, or relief and yard waste collection programs. So it was just a partial response, and it only included automated curbside residential collection. The other vendor, Casella Waste, offered a complete submittal for all offered services with 2 notable points, and I think these are important to pick up on. 1, they submitted an alternate proposal to use automated collection on the curbside collection routes instead of the manual collection we presently have. And 2, they held that the operation of the Concord transfer station was conditional on the award on all other collection elements. So you just could not parse out certain pieces that if they were going to operate the transfer station, they wanted the whole contract. So 1 was partial and 1 was complete with some very specific conditions of the 2 proposals. And remember, in looking at the disposal and collection proposals in the council report, that the contracts would be awarded to the combination of the firms that represent the lowest cost and in the best interest of the city. So let's step back for a minute. What did we learn going out into the market? Because we hadn't been there for about 8 or 9 years. I think there's some specific takeaways that we should take away from the process. One is that the industry is moving, really has moved, to automated rather than manual collection for curbside collection. In a lot of ways, this makes sense. It's simply looking at the labor market challenges that all industries have experienced. From this process, we believe that this is the last contract that the city will have that includes manual curbside collection for at least part of its term. I think this is the last term that we will have manual collection in the city of Concord. Manual collection is not a service that will be available in future markets. We've also learned, as we suspected, that fixed pricing for recycling process is no longer available. Recyclables are a commodity that go up and down, and all the proposals reflect the use of an indices in pricing. This is new for the city, and pricing will change regularly in this contract. Further, vendors now shift fuel and environmental cost increases onto municipalities, something the city has largely been protected from before. We've seen some fuel surcharges, for instance, in our paving contracts, but not both environmental and fuel together. Lastly, we learned that separate disposal and collection RFPs were in the best interest of the city, and we did well by going this route. Had we not, using 1 vendor for both collection and disposal would have resulted in higher overall total cost. So based upon the combined costs of disposal and collection, the local waste-to-energy facility, Wind Waste, previously Wheelabrator, in Pennacook was determined to be the lowest cost disposal provider for the city. In subsequent negotiations, we sought extended disposal terms to 7 and 10 years in an effort to bring down the initial year tip fees, which we were able to do. Importantly, the practices of waste disposal through incineration at a waste-to-energy facility is aligned with the state's ordered preference for solid waste management, which places such technologies over traditional disposal such as landfilling. Likewise, based upon the combined cost of disposal and collection, Casella was determined to be the lowest cost collections provider for the city. They were the only proposer to offer all requested services. And similar to the negotiations with Wind Waste, the city sought to extend term proposals with Casella for 7 and 10-year terms. Here, remembering the industry shift from manual to automated curbside collections, those extended term proposals only came with a required shift to automated collection in the term of the longer contract. So what are we talking about automated collection? Here we have a short video to share with you which illustrates the concept. As you will see, this is a toter-based collection method whereby residents are provided toters of different sizes, typically 64 gallons for trash and 94 gallons for recyclables, that are picked up by a collection vehicle with the use of an arm. So Adam's going to boot up a little video here. What do you want to add? Let me go through this. Okay. Thanks, Adam. So recognizing that this is a significant change in how solid waste services are provided at the curb, we stepped back and began to look at what options are for the city, given that it has become apparent manual collection is going away one way or another due to industry changes. As such, we identified the following timelines for transition. First would be an immediate transition on July 1st of 2024 as proposed by Casella as an alternate to their five-year term. Or a sudden transition on July 1st of 2029 at the end of a 5-year manual collection term as proposed by Casella. Or an orderly transition by July 1st of 2027 after a 2-year pilot that starts by July 1st of 2025 as proposed by Casella's 7-year term. Or an orderly transition by July 1st of 2028 after a 2-year pilot that starts by July 1st of 2026 as proposed by Casella's 10-year term. And given these 4 timelines, the department recommends the 4th timeline. Again, that would be an orderly transition to automated collection by July 1st of 2028 after a 2-year pilot that begins by July 1st of 2026, as proposed by Casella's 10-year term. This recommendation comes for 3 reasons. First, this provides the city with the opportunity to undertake an orderly transition to an automated collection program. The idea of an immediate transition or a sudden transition does not seem prudent given the alternatives we have before us. Secondly, this orderly transition allows for the implementation of a pilot program in year 2 of the collections contract, with full implementation in the city by year 4. This pilot program will allow for some time to look at the logistics, the finances, and the function of the program as it rolls out. And lastly, based upon our strong belief that manual curbside collection will not be available to the city past the year 2029, this alternative delays the orderly transition to automated collection as long as possible, coming just 1 year earlier than we would have with a sudden transition. And I think of the 3 reasons that we fall to this recommendation, in our view, that's the most important. Thinking further about the transition and resident impacts, we see the pilot program as an opportunity to address and work through a number of things, including things this committee has discussed prior to implementation. This abbreviated list includes some of them, but it is not limited to all of them. One is working with residents on program understanding and execution, working on delivery and collection logistics with residents and our vendor, engaging residents in the process, provide significant outreach and educational opportunities. It avoids a sudden transition which may have pitfalls, and evaluate and modify the program as we go forward. One thing of note is that Concord is hardly going to be the first New Hampshire municipality that has gone through this transition. In fact, we will be one of the last. New Hampshire towns and cities that are already using automated collection include Manchester, Nashua, Rochester, Londonderry, Bow, and it's just being introduced in Laconia currently. Anecdotally, we can share that Dover, which is still manual, is currently contemplating a transition to its current contract. Recommendations. Okay, so where are we at? Relative to disposal and collection, we are seeking the following recommendations from SWAC at its next meeting on March 28th to coincide with our department recommendations. Regarding disposal, we recommend approving the resolution that was brought forward to City Council in March, and that resolution would be in accordance with RSA 149-M:17, Roman numeral 4, and that resolution would basically have our solid waste be disposed of the waste-to-energy facility operated by Wind Waste in Pennacook. The second, relative to collection, is to recommend the city manager to execute the 10-year contract term with Casella to include procurement, deployment, and maintenance of the toters. And thirdly, we'd be happy to take any questions.
First, thank you very much for the presentation, very thorough, and I actually meant to say something at the beginning of this meeting, which is I can't thank staff enough for not just the volume of hours, but the quality of time that was put into the RFP process, drafting, soliciting, reviewing, crafting a report, and it can't be understated. So thank you very much, and I will make the same comment at the April meeting as well. Any questions from the committee that they would like to ask? Zandra.
Thank you, and I would echo the counselor's comments. It's been great to see all the good communication out of the department. People may wonder why there were only a couple of vendors who applied for the contracts, and so I was just curious if you could answer whether or not that we only expected 2, 3, 4 to respond, or if there's many more operating in New Hampshire.
Well, to that point, we informally reached out to the vendors that are in the region. Some of the responses we got was Concord's a little bit remote for us, was one. Another response we got was we've got a lot of issues right now that we're trying to juggle, okay? I think the solid waste industry is in a period of, and has been in a period of significant transition. I think that's reflective in the responses that we did receive. I think that it's you know, in part of where we are geographically located. We're not, you know, that, you know, further south where there's more vendors. So we're located on the, I don't want to say the northern frontier or the northern fringe, but
Gateway.
yeah.
I think that's a good question. Anyone else have questions? Councilor McNamara?
I too have appreciated all of our conversations and all the learning experiences we've had at our SWAC meetings. And one of the things that we talked about a lot was, like you said, going from automated to mechanical.
Manual.
Thank you, to automated. Along with that, we talked about the size of the bins that people will have to have, and some will have two. Is it a choice to have two, one recycle and one non-recyclable materials, green and blue,
Correct.
per household? Second question.
Please.
Maybe we don't know this yet, but will neighbors be able to go in and share on two of the large receptacles? Because I know some of our streets, we talked about size of the streets,
Right.
narrowness. Is that an option, do we know?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I think that's something that would come up in the pilot program we
Okay.
can work through, you know, and that to me speaks to why the pilot program is important. You know, we're going to have a number of issues, size, you know, different housing type scenarios or densities. We're going to be able to work through those.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Councilor Todd?
Thank you. Further to Councilor McNamara's question, I know that some concern when automated pickup was introduced several years back for Concord as a possibility was that because of the narrow streets, a lot of the vehicles for pickup weren't able to navigate them, and so a lot of residents actually have to drive their trash to the front of the street to a pickup location. Would we be able to work with Casella, do you think, to have them re-examine that policy and see if they might actually be able to, in fact, make it down some of the streets and turn around with the vehicles that they'll be using now?
I think the, in our discussions with Casella, they understand that there will be needs to tailor certain situations. As to that specific one, I don't have an answer for you, Councilor Todd. But I think there are areas where they understand it may not be one size fits all, I guess, and you need to tailor it to meet the community's needs.
Yeah, I would just add that it's my understanding that in cities that have automated collection presently, you know, there can be some parts that, you know, the individual will get out of the truck and then, you know, hook the toter onto the truck because of density issues.
Okay, good to
So
know.
that'd
Thank you.
be,
Another good reason for the pilot,
Right.
in my opinion.
Right, I agree, yeah. Yeah.
I think about some other communities that are trying to implement this without a pilot. They're trying to do it on the fly, so to speak. So I think that's what makes it, in our view, the 10-year term that was negotiated with Casella very attractive, because you do have that pilot and you do gain the comfort of the manual collection that you've enjoyed for a long period of time.
A follow-up question on that. Has there been any discussion about what the pilot program will look like? Is it going to be by ward, or is it going to be targeted, you know, some sections of the downtown community versus some of our rural neighborhoods?
Sure. So there's 5 collection days every week, and so what we've imagined is that there will be one truck. We presently have 4 trucks that collect each day, so there will be one automated truck assigned to each day. You know, they'll have that automated truck, and so there'll be a section of each day's route that will be involved in the pilot program.
Interesting. And again, I would imagine as we go forward, there'll be plenty of time to talk about, you know, at this committee, how that pilot might come about, whether it be individuals opting in to participate in the pilot versus, you know, sections within one of those 5 collection days. But,
Yeah, I think it would have to be, you know, a certain route, so you wouldn't want to skip over homes, you know, so, but we could certainly, you know, involve the committee in figuring out with the vendor what those pilot routes look like.
thank you. I did have one more question. Relative to the different options, the 4 options for collection, which was, you know, rip the Band-Aid off on day 1 versus, you know, at the end of the 5-year period versus what we're calling options 3 and 4, which is allowance for a pilot period. Relative to cost for those different options, I'm sorry, for options 3 and 4, which is the pilot program, 7 years versus 10 years, how do the finances look for those 2 options?
It's all in the
And I don't need exact
report,
numbers,
yeah.
but. You know,
Yeah, I mean, they differ a little bit because of the capital infusion, you know, so you're buying the carts at a different time, you're buying the vehicles at a different time. You can look at them and compare. I think broadly, the financial picture, while it is, you know, an adjustment from the last contract term, it's a good contract. It's a good contract. And so you can see, you know, when you compare the 7 and 10, to answer your question, you know, the 5 or the 7 and the 10, you can really see where their capital comes into the contract.
And the other thing I think is when you compare the cost to the other vendor,
Yeah.
you can see that their cost is lower.
In the 10-year contract, or?
Well, when you can do a like-to-like with a 5-year contracts, because they don't have the comparisons at the longer terms, but at the initial proposal, Casella's pricing was less than the other vendor.
So I guess one more financial consideration that kind of strikes me is as we contemplate moving over to automated collection, there's a very real necessity to reconsider the purple bag program that we have today. You know, will residents be using purple trash bags, or will they not be using purple trash bags? Maybe you could comment on that particular component.
I think at this juncture, we see one of the benefits is the way we see, we would have residents use purple bag during the pilot program and then evaluate its effectiveness. And from there, if we need to adjust, then adjust.
And I guess, you know, that observation during the pilot period would be relative to our residents putting non-purple trash bags in those bins, and is there contamination, and are we losing revenues? And then there'd be a discussion of shifting from the purple bag revenue versus a straight
Cart-based system.
tax-based system.
Yeah. I contemplate having audits at the disposal site to see what the compliance level is. There's video cameras mounted to the trucks too, so we'll be able to identify non-compliance as well
At the property level.
at the property level.
Councilor Todd?
One more question, if I could, too. And this may not be something that you're prepared to answer right now, but at some point, maybe the next meeting, if there's a way to get more information about what the actual costs will be that residents, taxpayers will see as a result of just having to enter into a new contract. We understand that we had a sweetheart deal, and that you know, recycling has basically been zero cost for us. That's going to change. And additionally, the cost per ton is obviously also rising. I can't remember what the numbers, if it's going from like, what, 70 to 95 or something like that on average? Yeah, so somewhere in that range. Is there a way that we'd be able to do some math? And I'm not volunteering because I'm bad at math, so that's why I'm asking the question. Would be able to do some math to be able to sort of get a projection of how much difference in cost we might see, let's say, just in an average month of disposal, what we have now as opposed to what we could expect in the future?
Yeah, yeah.
How that might affect the
Yeah.
tax rate
Y-
and so
y-
forth?
Yeah, we can do that. You'll see further information during the budget cycle. You'll see the pro forma certainly, which will kind of, grab this next year and then the first few years of the contract. But yeah, we can have some financial information for sure.
That'd be great, thank you, yeah.
Thank you. I would add to that, perhaps for, if not available at our next meeting, which is a week from today, certainly for the council meeting, I'd love to know how much the community has saved with its existing contract, say, over the last 5 years, as other communities were paying, $70, $100 a ton to dispose of recyclables. How much cost have we avoided through our current contract?
I think we could have those figures for your next meeting.
Thank you very much. Obviously, we keep pinging with different questions, and these are things that we've talked about since, well, over a year, but certainly in earnest since September. Mr. Steinhaus, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Anybody else? All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. On that note, we will open it up to the public to hear their comments and feedback. And we'll see where we go from there. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody who wishes to speak? Mr. Schweiker?
Now, come on, was that a serious question?
I'm just being polite. I knew you were going to, I saw your notebook, so.
Okay, well, as customarily, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Roy Schweiker from Concord, and I'm going to suggest that, well, I don't care whether you have a flow ordinance or not. If he thinks it's a good idea, that's great. I think it's far more reasonable to have our stuff burned right in town and produce electricity than haul it up and dump it in a pile in the White Mountains somewhere. So I'm completely in agreement with those two. But I'm still, let's say, highly skeptical of this container collection. There are good reasons we didn't do it before. I don't think the city's gotten any better. I mean, it may have gotten better in terms of we have more housing built in the suburbs that have a garage against the street where you can keep these containers. But in terms of, there are still parts of the city that containers are not going to work very well. I mean, one of the issues last time is, as you may or may not be aware, most of the multifamily homes in the downtown area do not have dumpsters. They put out purple bags. A lot of those people live on the second floor. Are they going to cart the 60-gallon and 90-gallon container up to the second floor and down every week? Or the landlord is saying, well, there's no place to put them. We don't have that much space on the ground level for these containers. So I think that, that's one item, is the storage of them. Another item is when I saw that behemoth truck, I think that the wires on my street, they're going to be knocking wires down all the time trying to lift that container up and dump it in the top of that truck. So, I mean, there's definitely going to be areas where the containers are not viable. And another third issue I have is the street I live on is not one of the steepest in the city, although it sometimes seems like that. It's 2/3 the slope of the Mount Washington Road. And already the recycle containers are not really functional, because on a slope like that, if you have a wind, it just sucks the recycle out and blows them all off on my lawn. And I think these giant containers, they may blow over when they're full and spill the stuff all over. They are more likely to blow over when they're empty and get run over by cars. So, there are areas of the city where I think containerization would work great. There are areas I don't think it would work great. I know there are people that will show up and tell you, if you, had more hearings that were better publicized, this will not work in my area. There are people saying, gee, I'd love that, to have a big container roll all my bags out. So I'm wondering if there is some solution whereby we could have hybrid collection in this city, where some people have containers and some have, pick up with the Packer trucks. I mean, you're talking about getting equipment. Well, that may be true with the container trucks, but it sounds like in 5 years there'll be a huge surplus of Packer garbage trucks available. So it'll be very easy to get one of them if you want to keep them in service. It's also occurred to me that that would be a lovely minority business to run the collection service using Packer trucks, because those guys that dump trash in the back do not have to be able to speak English well. So I think that it would be easily possible to get a local minority vendor to do the collection with the traditional garbage trucks. And I think that having it split, 2 ways in the city could be the solution to a lot of problems. So what I would like to suggest is, if you cannot reject all of the contracts that were proposed, to say, let go with the 5-year proposal, with the understanding that probably Casella will agree to modify that in their favor to put in a pilot for one thing, and to try different things during that time frame. Whereas, otherwise, I mean, normally when I think of it as a pilot, you try something, and if it doesn't work, you can it. But the way this pilot is described, well, whether it works or not, we still have to do it. And that's not right. So I think the only way to do it is to have the 5-year traditional collection with the understanding that we may ask Casella to, shift one route, earlier for experiment. And once again, I was talking to Mr. Champlin about this, and he had an idea, which I also had, and that is, if you may remember, when we went to the purple bags, there was a great reduction in the amount of trash. And if you go to these containers, whether that number will come up again, so we'll be having more trash to be paid for by the ton. And, you're talking about putting purple bags in the containers. The operator of the truck cannot see what color those bags are. He just picks the thing up and dumps it. And maybe you have a camera up there that looks at what bags are, but considering that, if I go around the city and look at the recycle bins, I would say at least half of the recycle bins have contaminants in them. And even though they're presently open, nobody does anything about them. If you're putting the recycles and all in this, giant 90-gallon container, dump it in the truck, maybe have a camera watch the stuff fill in, how are you going to tell whether it's good or not? But I think that there's going to be far more contaminants in the recycling. Those will be worth almost nothing. And the last thing is, or one of the last things, is that right now the purple bags are optional. You don't have to use purple bags if you don't want to. You can take your own stuff to the transfer station and pay by the ton. You can take a purple bag there if you don't want to leave it out front. And I'd like to suggest that we do the same thing with the containerized system, that we still let people decline to use a container and take their stuff to the transfer station in a purple bag, or pay, by load down there, because some people containers just aren't going to work. I don't know where I'm going to put a 60-gallon and a 90-gallon thing. I put out less than one purple bag a week, which is 10 gallons. Take me, 3 months to fill up one of those? This is ridiculous. I'm not going to keep one of those things around. And the idea of sharing them, I think that will work very well as long as you're allowed to put purple bags in them. But, once you start just filling up the bin with random bags, which I think is what it's coming to, then it's going to be a matter of who's putting more in. And I think that, once again, that's a modification of the contract, that they're probably assuming that there will be one bin per current household. And if people start sharing bins or decline to use them, you might easily drop the number of bins by a third. And, some amount of the time collecting is driving the truck around, maybe half of it. And the other half, you see, it takes a long time to stop and flop in those 2 bins. So if you could cut the number of containers by a third, you could cut the, time running the route by a substantial amount. So they should be willing to give you a break on the price. So setting a fixed price for, what it's going to cost you per year. If they discover they're picking up only 3/4 as many bins as they thought, they should be able to give us a break on that. So we should talk about a contract when we get into the bins of per bin for the collection, and not just a flat amount. And the thing is, if people start doubling up on bins, we're still having to pay by the ton for the trash. We're not gaining on that, but at least we're gaining on the time to collect the bins and the cost of the bins and the cost of paying somebody to do it. So, and the last thing is, I'm very skeptical about how they're going to work with the public during the pilot. General Services has never wanted to work with the public on leaf pickup. We still don't have reasonable notification of leaf pickup. They don't work with the public on snow plowing. Why do you think they're going to work with them on trash? So, thank you.
I appreciate your testimony. Any questions for Mr. Schweiker? Councilor Rice-Hawkins.
More of a comment. I think you meant this with the best of intentions, but I would just caution against given the history in our country of suggesting the English language learners should do trash pickup. But I think you meant it with better intentions, so we should certainly talk about it another time. But I do want to thank you for your testimony. I think you brought up a lot of questions that I think we're going to hear from a lot of community members, and so it's helpful to kind of hear the rundown of the different considerations, particularly for those in multifamily units. Thank you.
Well, once again, I'm not saying that minorities are only suitable for picking up trash. That does not, I mean, it has a reasonable pay level, doesn't pay as well as the city manager, but, you make good money doing it, and you don't require some skills that might be required for other jobs at that pay level. And I certainly would not, have anything that only minority people are allowed to apply for the jobs. Anybody can apply, just there's somebody that it might be a particularly good opportunity.
Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else wish to speak? Miss?
To have a notebook. I'm Gail Page. I live up on the Heights on East Side Drive. I live alone, and well, one point I would make, I didn't hear everything that Mr. Schweiker said, so forgive me if I'm repeating, but I put out one small purple bag every 3 weeks, and I have a wagon that I carry it out to the curb with because otherwise I couldn't do it. So that's something I want you to consider, that there are folks who are getting older and may or may not be able to handle these bins. I don't know what they look like, honestly, but I think I did hear him say something about how the purple bags decreased the amount of trash that got disposed of, which is sort of an interesting thing. I'm not sure where the rest of it went. Maybe compost, but I'm not sure.
Well, by way of quick comment, we often wondered about that as well. Where
I'll
did the
bet,
trash
okay.
go?
Yeah.
So, I think Mr. Chesley would tell you that he spent a great deal of time those first few weeks trying to figure out where our trash ended up, and we never figured it out. So
No. Okay. I'm on the Trails Committee. I'll say it's not out there.
that's good. Sorry to interrupt.
It's okay. One thing that I've been bothered about for a long time is the limit to what Casella is able to recycle. I think you may have gotten my email that I exchanged with a fellow in New Jersey, because I was trying to find where to send my Tetra Paks. Those are those aseptic boxes that are not accepted. And then there are all the plastic bags that are above 5 and above in their little triangular the triangular designation that don't have a place to go, at least in Concord. The thing that did get sent is something called Tetracycle Home or something like that. It's an impressive operation, but I don't think they operate in Concord. I did ask them, and they don't. But they recycle just about everything. So I'm just wondering if there might be some more research. I haven't had time to do it, but that might give us more options for recycling and consequently decrease what goes to the incinerator. Which brings me to the incinerator. There have been questions in the past about what happens to the fumes that come out of there. And I don't know the answer to that, but it does concern me. Burning our trash keeps it out of the landfill, but what are we adding to the air is my question. Let's see. I think that's it.
Well, thank you very
Thank you.
much. Any questions for Ms. Page? No, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Anyone else wish to speak today? All right, we will wrap up the public hearing portion of our meeting. I'm hoping someone from staff can come up, maybe we talk about if anybody listening to the presentation today, if they'd like to send an email or reach out to share their thoughts between now and next Tuesday, how they can do so.
I think that the best way would be to contact our general services email address, which is on the web.
And certainly for those listening, so what we heard, if you have any, written testimony that you'd like to submit regarding your thoughts regarding what we discussed this evening, send to the general services, general email box.
It's generalservices@concordnh.gov.
All right, thank you very much for that. And certainly everybody's welcome to, reach out to their ward counselor and share their thoughts. By way of wrapping up, I will just reiterate, and then I'll turn it over to the staff one more time. We'll be meeting here again next Tuesday. There'll be an opportunity for some additional testimony, and at which point, when that's completed, the Solid Waste Advisory Committee will discuss the proposal and the committee's recommendation to the full council, which will be part of the discussion on April 10th. Anybody else from the committee wish to have any comments? Councilor Todd?
I just had actually one question Mr. Schweiker brought up. Are we anticipating that the transfer station is going to be operating under the new contract in the same manner as it has previously? So in other words, if residents wanted to drop off their materials, they could still go to the transfer station and do that, right?
Yes.
Okay, good, thank you.
Great. Staff, you all set? Anybody else have any questions?
We're good.
No, I just went, the next item is confirming the quorum for the next meeting, as we'll be asking for a recommendation. We'll want to.
All right, so I know we've talked about some of these dates before. I will be available. Please check your calendars. If for some reason you cannot be available, please let us know as soon as possible. Does anybody anticipate not being here next Tuesday?
I will be, I'm out of the,
You will be out. So Councilor Rice Hawkins did leave. Certainly the four of us present do constitute a quorum, and hopefully Councilor Rice Hawkins can also attend, and potentially Councilor McLaughlin. So I think we'll be fine.
Should I show up next week?
I think it would certainly be prudent to hear the testimony,
Okay,
and we'll count for the quorum, and if you need to recuse yourself, you certainly can.
I can be there. I'll try to be on time this time.
Not a problem.
You're pretty close.
Went to the wrong building.
Did you?
We thought,
That's it, Keith. Thank you.
All right, well, not required. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
thank you.
Aye. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
thank you.